Hey everyone, Pat Reinhart here from Conductor, and really exciting times here if you're as big a nerd as I am. So today we are going to walk through Conductor's connector to ChatGPT, which is the connection to our MCP server, which we are launching, which we're very, very excited about. And again, I want to just preface this by saying we are still in very early days here, but I got everyone here to agree to let me do this because I've been talking about it for so long. And I just wanted to kind of show everybody what is possible when you do things like this, right? So what this is, for anyone who doesn't know, what an MCP server is, it's basically an adapter, right? And this connects your data to an agent like ChatGPT. And what you can do then is, without going into the Conductor, interface or UI, you can actually query our data and query your instance without ever logging in and just ask it questions. And this is a big piece of the future of what's going to be happening here. And again, very, very exciting and very early days. So we're going to do some basic stuff today just to get everyone, kind of in the, hey, here's what we're up to. But let's start out by asking it about our AISP data or AI search performance data, right? So just like any other ChatGPT, conversation, you can see here that we have connected to the Conductor connector. And right now, let's just ask it something like, for what topics do I have the most number of brand mentions, right? And what's happening here is that ChatGPT is going to go out and it is going to start querying, Conductor's API and the tools that we've built, and it is going to come back with the data that I have asked, which is really, really cool because that is, that's going to be the way that a lot of us, find data in the future. Maybe the UI isn't, the most important thing. It really is about the data that's the underpinnings and what's behind. And here, what you're going to see here is a very clear-cut answer from the Conductor account about what topics generate the most brand mentions for us in our AISP data. And you can see here that it's giving you very nice format here, like Conductor versus Profound. Not surprised to see that. AI overviews, AI search tool demo, and you can see here that there are all the different mentions of where Conductor is actually mentioned. It's going to give a nice summary, which I think is cool because, again, what are we all trying to get to? We are trying to get to that summary, right, about what is happening. And this is just, I would say, less friction, right, to getting that data out if you just need to understand something. And maybe you don't want to dig around. Maybe you just want to, hey, I got a meeting in 15 minutes. I need to know X, Y, Z, right? So looking at the summary, what do you have? Top topic is Conductor versus Profound, 534 mentions, and then ultimately gives you, a final ranking of what was, what topics have the most, the biggest number, right? Now, the cool part here is that that's not necessarily where it ends, right? Because you can see down here is, hey, if you want to, I can also, and this is really the powerful part of what this is all going to be, right? It doesn't stop there. You can keep asking it questions, right? So right here, it's visualize this in a chart, compare your topics versus competitors, break down mention sentiment. We'll get to that. Show daily or weekly trends for each topic. Think about the possibilities of everything that you could ask. You could ask this connector, and it will come back to you. And just like any other, AI chat, it'll give you the answer. So big question that a lot of people have, who are my biggest competitors by brand mention, market share. And let's see what comes up. And again, this is going to go into the instance within Conductor, and it's going to show exactly what competitors are there. And I can't believe it, everybody. Can you believe it? Biggest competitor is SEMrush. So that is obviously not surprising. But again, look at this, without having to go in and, dig around, you can get this nice chart that shows up and shows you all the different mentions and even saying if it's a major competitor or not. Obviously, SEMrush is a partner and a competitor of ours. Ahrefs is a competitor, and then you have, others down the list. And the cool thing is that, again, like it gives you a lot of different types of information, and it even gets you down to market share, right? So the cool thing about this is that, and I'm thinking about the market share piece in general, is that yes, these are our biggest, our biggest competitors are here, which is not surprising. But ultimately, when you look at the market share, you can go down and say, it's like, okay, it's like for market share, can you show me a pie chart that presents this data? And this is where I think a lot of people are going to get a ton of value, out of these connectors. Is that, let's say you have a presentation coming up, right? And you want something, that's in your brand colors, your brand guidelines, but necessarily you want to do that. Now look at this. So here's the pie chart, right? What happened? Like ChatGPT just created the pie chart for me that I can now copy and paste, and ultimately even make interactive if we want to. How cool is that, right? Look at this, right? As you go around, you can make it interactive. You can change the colors of all the different competitors. And again, think about this in the vein of you creating a presentation and needing a pie chart, and maybe you want to use different colors, for certain competitors. And from there, and you can obviously resize it, make this, and you make it really big so you can take a picture of it or download it. Again, like this is the type of powerful stuff that we're going to be able to do. And this is only scratching the surface. Again, I want to mention, this is only scratching the surface of what is possible, through connectors like this. And we're very early days. I'm showing you very basic workflows here, but we're going to be able to build visualizations, custom visualizations off of Conductor's data so much easier than we ever have before in the past. And it's really, really exciting. So what if I was thinking of like, what are some of the topics and queries that SEMrush performs well on in terms of brand mentions versus me? And what you're going to see here is, again, just another example of the ease of getting the data or extrapolating the data out of our system and into a very digestible answer, for lack of better words, right? And I think for me, it's the time that this is going to save, which is really exciting, right? Like, yes, you'll be able, like folks who are not data analysts and are not, necessarily good with pivoting data, creating visualizations, you're going to be able just to chat here and create all different types of visualizations, and everything that, like any weird ask that your boss has, you're going to be able to, if the data's there, you're going to be able to build something, right? And I think that is where, a lot of the excitement for me comes, because, a lot of folks have trouble with this, and this is going to make it so much easier, right? And again, look at this. So now here we are, and we have, topics that SEMrush outperforms us: SEO platform, AI SEO strategy, et cetera, et cetera. But then, and then where they, performs well versus us, but then where we do not compete, which is, again, this is what we're really looking for, is like, what should I do, right? Like, what is the answer here, right? And then again, all of this different data, and I can sit here and read it to you, I'm not going to, but ultimately what you can see here is that there's a lot of data being formatted very easily, that you could in theory could take a snapshot of this and put it into a presentation, put it into an email, and answer these questions that would have taken you time to go in and dig around. Now you can come in and just chat away and say, hey, listen, this is what this is what I'm looking for. Here's the visualization, and here's what I want to do. And look at this, and then look at this. It's like, if you want to, I can also provide, a comparison chart, topic level share of voice differences, recommendations on where you should strengthen your presence. Now, what's the next question that everyone is going to be asking, right? Yep, let's do that. So I'm just literally going to copy and paste that. And what's going to happen here? We're going to have a plan, or at least the beginning of a plan. And again, still very early days, but here's some actionable data-driven recommendations. Thanks, ChatGPT. I appreciate the energy. But ultimately, this is how you can go from, hey, I want to find out what's going on. Hey, like, what's the visibility? what are we what are we trying to figure out? And like, I have this question that I need answered. But then you also can start a plan by saying like, hey, listen, like what do you think I should do about this, right? Here, strengthen presence in SEO platform, expand authority in AIO SEO strategy, build footprint in AI competitive intelligence, et cetera, right? And again, this comes back to me, it's the time savings. It's the time savings that this is going to create, and you're using the same data. Right, you're using our data, because this is pulling directly from Conductor's data platform. So this is the same stuff that you're going to see in the platform, right? Like you go in and you dig around, you're going to see all the same stuff. This just helps it get to your fingertips a little bit, a lot of it, quicker. And from that perspective, that's what's most exciting, right? And the other cool part is the conversation never actually ends or necessarily has to end. If you want to keep iterating, there's so many here. Like, again, generate a competitor gap analysis chart. That would be cool. Show market share shifts over time. Provide, produce a strategic action plan. So we could write the whole action plan for you, and then you could edit. Again, time savings, and identify the queries where you already outperform SEMrush, right? Like these are all questions that that we have on a week-to-week, month-to-month basis, day-to-day basis, and now we can just simply query this, and it will be there like magic, and it's again, it really comes down to the time savings. And for me, again, I go back to the visualizations, like showing market share shifts over time, visualizing that, generate a competitor gap analysis, doing that, chart, doing that over time. This is where a lot of people are going to get a ton of value out of this, is the visualizations, because listen, every product on earth has their own visualizations, and maybe sometimes they're not exactly what you're looking for. Here, you can use all the data that's available to you, and you can make whatever you want. You can make any chart that you want, really. It's like, hey, listen, like generate a competitive gap analysis chart. Sure, I'd love to see that. Let's see what it comes up with, right? And I think for me, this is where a lot of the fun will be, because I can't wait to see what people create with this using Conductor's data. And again, look at this. Like this will actually go down and start showing you like all the different ways that you can do it. You'll start to get different options. And this is a little bit more nerdy, down the path. But again, like all of this stuff, it'll start to, what I'm showing you here is that it'll start to have, the conversation will start to get, hey, what do you want to do? Like, what type of competitor gap chart would you like, right? Like, is it topic level? Is it query level? Is it all of the above? Me, I'm an all of the above guy. So, I want to see what everything looks like, right? And that's where, like they're going to ask questions like these agents are going to ask questions that you probably wouldn't even think of, right? And then they're going to generate something that you wouldn't even think of, and that'll be such a cooler deliverable for you, once it pops up. Like you're going to be able to mess around with it so much, and the story that you tell is going to be so much clearer, and it's going to have such more personality by being able to be built by you yourself, that you're going to come up and you're going to be like, yeah, like look at all this, right? Within a few minutes, right? What was that? A couple of minutes, like, and look at all this stuff that, that started to come up, and someone asks you for a competitive analysis. Look at all these different visualizations that you can use now. So much easier, and it's so cool to be able to do this in just a few minutes, right? And now you can click, all of these are available. Again, you can make it interactive, which I think is super cool. You can change the colors if you want to. You can download it, or you can simply, you just want to take a screenshot, throw it right into your presentation, right? And again, this is all coming from Conductor's data in your account. But something else I talk a lot about is personas, right? Like persona analysis, and like just going into the data. It's like, can you analyze where I have the strongest and weakest brand mentions by persona? Because we have that information in our data. And again, this comes down to, how long would this take? Ask yourself that question right now. How long would this take? For me, a lot of times, like doing persona analysis, yes, the technology obviously makes it easier, but really digging in and figuring out what's going on, that would take time, just to formulate the first response, right? But here, again, going back to what I believe, it's the time savings. Like AI is a productivity tool. And this is how I see this, right? But look at this, right? So your brand mentions by persona aggregated over time. So the personas that we have are the SEO, the content marketer, and the CMO/digital marketing leader. And you can see here that across all of those, we appear in those three. SEO, we appear 604 times, 305 in the CMO level, and 302 times in the content marketer. So not surprisingly, the strongest persona for our brand, since we are rooted in search, over 15 years of search experience. Being in this space, not surprising that the SEO persona is our strongest one. But interesting is that, CMO and digital marketing leader and content marketer, right there. We're not that far behind. So ultimately, so again, another part of this is here's more competitive information right here, right? And of course, what everyone's looking for is like where, what should I do about, the weakest persona, right? And again, it's going to give a lot of different information here that I won't read, because again, this is, you'll be able to play with this in the future. But ultimately, what happens, recommendations, right? Like the analysis comes down to what should I do? Okay. And, for the SEO persona, increase thought leadership on enterprise SEO intelligence, et cetera, promote your AI content workflows, et cetera. Double down on ROI, cost efficiency. It's giving you things to do, right? It's giving you, it's giving you like what we should, basically what you should write about. And, from there, you can also see, now that we know all this, something that I always ask, it's like, okay, so you're asking me to create, a lot of this is to create content, right? And create thought leadership. Can you give me a list of topics to cover for each persona? And what does this do? This is something that you can use in your content calendars. You can use, just basically add to your content strategy, at least spark a conversation with people, around the organization about where our gaps are and what we should be writing about. And then you can take this and just go right back into Writing Assistant, and write about all of this, right, in an instant. So within 15, 20 minutes, you can go in, understand, ask a bunch of questions, understand what you should be writing about, and ultimately go back and create something much quicker than you would have, I would say, just a few short months ago. And to me, listen, I've been in this industry for a long time, over 20 years, seeing this and seeing things like this is so cool, and it's so exciting, and it's so nerdy, but ultimately this is, it's so game changing that when this will become, publicly available, and this is just the beginning. This is scratching the surface of what we're going to be able to do. I am showing you, and I just want to reiterate, I am showing you very, very basic workflows, here. All right, look at all this stuff. Look at all this stuff, that you can write about here, right? But I am showing you very basic workflows here. In the near future, this is only going to get better. Right, like this is something that we are actively working on a day-to-day basis, and you'll be able to do everything in here in the near future, right? Like not just look into our AI data, you'll be able to look into data across the platform, and you'll be able to ask it, pretty much anything you can think of, as long as that data is there in your instance or in our database, you'll be able to extrapolate that data and and build some thoughts on it. And I think that, to me, is the coolest part about it all, is that you're going to be able to, I'll tell you, about 2 years ago, when I always say our new CPO Wei Zhang, like she is not new at all, but like one of the first things she had said was like, imagine a world where you could just ask your data something and it would create it for you. And we had seen an early prototype of it, and it felt like science fiction to me, honestly, a few years ago. And this is actually before even Chat. It was right around when ChatGPT was being launched, but I think it was actually a little before it. And everyone looked around and said, like, man, that would be cool. And here I am, a few short years later, and that's what I'm doing, right? Like this is reality, everybody. Like this is here. Wei was right. Like this is possible. And here I am, sitting here just asking questions of our data set, and it's giving me answers, it's giving me next steps, it's building me visualizations. It's unbelievable. It's absolutely unbelievable and really exciting for someone who's been in the space as long as I have. And I hope exciting to you, no matter how long you've been in the space, or even if you're just learning about this. This is game changing. This is the future of what we're all going to be doing. And again, I'm so happy that, Conductor made the decision several years ago to completely rebuild the underpinnings of our product to support something like this, because no one else is going to be able to do it as good as we can. And that is a testament to our engineering folks. It's a testament to Way's vision, and to Seth's, to Seth's drive to push the company to build that. It was a long 3 years, but we're here. But the fact that I'm sitting here in ChatGPT using the connector to Conductor's data platform, it's not science fiction anymore, everyone. Like, this is how we're all going to be searching. And again, that doesn't mean you're never going to log into Conductor. It doesn't mean I'm never going to log into Conductor again. But if I need answers on the fly, or if I want to, kind of brainstorm, with myself, I suppose, back and forth and build something and then present it, as a starting point for the team, this is what I'm going to be doing. Can you build me a playbook for this? So this is something that a lot of people are constantly asking for. Is like, okay, from here, it's like, let's say we wanted a playbook for one of these, for one of the analysis that we did, right? So from here, what you're going to see is that this is going to be based on the sentiment. It's going right now, what it's doing is showing, it's showing what it's going to be pulling. What they're going to be doing is they're going to be combining the brand's and citations data set. And, oh, good, they have all of the data sets needed. Thank you for confirming, ChatGPT. Appreciate you. And now we're going to get a full competitive playbook, thinking about brand level sentiment, persona performance, topic and query, strength and weaknesses, market share, citation level influence, and cross-brand competitive signals. How cool is that? And then here, obviously, I'm not going to read it, but basically just showing you, look at this. It's different playbooks for all of these different things. And these are actionable next steps that you can take, right? And this will go on for a while. But ultimately, what you're seeing here is this is the future of how we're going to be starting our plans and probably finishing our plans as well of what we're going to do, right? And this is going to help us move fast. Right? It's going to help us move fast. It will add speed. It will add agility to our organizations. But more importantly, it'll add speed and agility to us, to our day-to-day, right? Think of all the tasks and again, manually digging around for things, right? That takes time. Analysis takes time. It's great to have a friend here, a very smart friend that is connected to your data set and can hang out with you and say, hey, wait, I can do all the tedious stuff for you, like pulling all the data and pivoting all the data and compiling it into a thought. And now what your job is not to just blindly say, hey, yes, this is what we're going to do. Now your job is using the strategic part of the brain, right? Saying listen, I don't have to do all these manual tasks anymore, right? I don't have to start and write out all these playbooks. What I can do now is review the playbooks and make sure that it aligns to the strategy that my company needs from me, right? And that will save you time, that will save you headache, and that will save you, in my opinion, a lot of frustration of pulling and pivoting data, right? Because look at all this, right? All these things, it's giving you a complete, it's giving you all of this right at your fingertips. And again, I know I've said this a million times, but the time savings here is going to be unbelievable. But with that, I'm going to leave it there. Again, want to reiterate, this is only the beginning. I am showing very basic workflows that you can pull out of the Conductor connector with OpenAI and ChatGPT. We will definitely be working on, on making it better, connecting with other LLMs so that you can use the one of your choice. But right now, very exciting, everyone. And we're going to have more of these videos going through this as we develop this. So buckle in for a series and dealing with me for quite a long time, not just on 30/30. But with that, everyone, thanks so much. Pat Reinhart from Conductor here. Looking forward to the next one and showing you how this evolves over time. Catch you next time.